Hey everyone, and welcome. So if you've heard anything about IVF, you've probably heard about the 2 weeks of shots, right? But what if I told you that's just one tiny piece of a much, much bigger story? In this explainer, we're going to pull back the curtain and demystify the entire IVF journey from the very first test to that final result. Let's get into it.
This is it. This is the big one, the number one question on just about everyone's mind when they start thinking about this. You're trying to plan your life, your job, your finances, and you just really need to know, how long is this actually going to take?
And the answer you almost always hear is this one: 2 weeks. And, in a way it's kind of true. This is the part everyone talks about: the daily injections, the constant doctor's appointments. It's definitely the most intense hands-on part of the whole thing for the patient.
But here's the thing, and this is a big but. That 2-week period is only one small piece of a much, much larger puzzle. Thinking IVF is just 2 weeks is like saying a marathon is just the final sprint to the finish line. There's a whole lot that comes before it and a whole lot that comes after.
Okay, so here's how we're going to break all this down. First, we're going to tackle that 2-week misconception head on. Then we'll map out the true timeline so you can see the whole picture. We'll get into a super important concept called the embryo funnel, and then talk about why planning for your future family is so critical from day one. And finally, we'll look at the science that makes this all possible. All right, let's start by unpacking what that famous 2-week period is actually all about. Seriously, understanding this one piece is the first step to seeing everything else clearly.
So that 2-week time frame, that's what doctors call the active stimulation phase. It's that really intense period of daily shots to get your ovaries to produce a bunch of eggs. You're going in for constant monitoring, ultrasounds, blood work, and it all leads up to the big day, the egg retrieval. It's for sure the most visible part of the process, but trust me, it is far from the whole story.
Okay, so if it's not just 2 weeks, what are we really talking about? Let's lay out all the building blocks of a complete IVF cycle, from the very beginning to the very end.
So check this out. This is the real process. Before you even think about starting, there's about a month of initial testing and data gathering. Then you've got the egg retrieval cycle itself, which is about 6 weeks long. After that, if you're doing a frozen embryo transfer, that's another 6-week block. So let's do the math. In a best-case scenario, for just one attempt, you're looking at roughly 3 months of active processes, and that's after your initial testing is even done.
This quote just hits the nail on the head. You have to think of the process in these 6-week chunks. Creating the embryos, that's one block. Getting your body ready for an embryo transfer, that's a whole separate block. Each big step is its own distinct 6-week process.
All right, now we need to talk about one of the most important and frankly often heartbreaking realities of IVF that a lot of people just don't understand until they're in the thick of it. It's a concept called attrition, or what we know as the embryo funnel. It's so easy to hear that someone got 10 eggs and think, wow, that's amazing, 10 chances. But that is a huge, huge misconception. The hard truth is, there's a natural, completely expected drop-off at every single stage of the process.
And this is what the IVF funnel is all about. It's the simple mathematical and biological reality that you will always start with a larger number of potential eggs than the final number of healthy, transferable embryos you end up with. It's just a process of narrowing things down.
Let's walk through a pretty typical example. Okay? A doctor might see 10 follicles on an ultrasound. From those, maybe they get 8 mature eggs at retrieval. Out of those 8, maybe 6 fertilize successfully. And then, after a few days of growing and maybe genetic testing, you might be left with 2 chromosomally normal embryos. See that? You started with 10 and you ended with 2. That's the funnel, right there in action.
And here is the key takeaway from all of this. Your doctor can only work with the number of potential eggs that your body naturally produces in a given month. They can't create more. So if the likely outcome from one cycle isn't enough for your family goals, the only way to get more embryos, the only way to widen the top of that funnel is to do more egg retrieval cycles.
This brings us to a really critical, strategic part of the conversation that honestly should happen before you even start your very first injection: planning for the family you ultimately want to have.
You know, a lot of the best fertility doctors ask this question first. It's not just about getting pregnant right now. It's about figuring out your long-term goals. Do you dream of 1 child or maybe 3? The answer to that question can completely change the strategy from day one. So why is this so important? Well, because time is the single biggest factor in all of this. Your age and your ovarian reserve directly impact how that funnel works for you. It's just biologically easier and way more efficient to create healthy embryos now than it will be in 2 or 3 years. Think of it like a return on investment of your time, your money, and your emotions. Planning ahead helps you and your doctor figure out if one retrieval cycle is likely to be enough, or if you should think about banking embryos now for the future.
Okay, so you might be wondering, why is this whole process so medicalized? Why all the medications, the precise timing, the constant monitoring? Let's dive into the science behind what actually makes an IVF cycle work.
Here it is, the core goal of IVF, right on this slide. In a natural cycle, your brain tells your body to pick one dominant egg, a winner, to grow and ovulate. The rest of the potential eggs for that month? They're just lost. The whole purpose of IVF medication is to override that signal from the brain and rescue the entire group, getting all of them to grow together.
And this process has a fancy name: controlled ovarian hyperstimulation. Let's break that down. The controlled part means we use medicine to temporarily quiet that normal conversation between your brain and your ovary. This stops one egg from taking over. The hyperstimulation part means we use other medications to basically send a really strong signal to the ovaries to grow all the eggs that are available in that month's group.
So at the end of the day, the entire purpose of an IVF medication plan is to maximize the potential of the group of eggs you have right now. It's all about working with your unique biology in this exact moment to get the absolute best possible starting number for that funnel.
But, and this is a big one, even after all of that hard work, after you've gone through that 6-week retrieval cycle and you have a perfect, chromosomally normal embryo, success still isn't a guarantee. A single genetically perfect embryo has about a 65% chance of leading to a live birth. That means about 35% of the time it doesn't work, and you need another transfer, another 6-week building block.
So, we'll leave you with this question to think about. Knowing that an IVF attempt is really a 3-month process at best, understanding the tough reality of the embryo funnel, and knowing the science of maximizing your potential right now, how does all of that change the way you approach planning for the family you hope to have? It really shifts the perspective, doesn't it? From a 2-week sprint to a well-planned marathon.